Hi, good morning, good afternoon, maybe even good evening for some of you. It's great to have many people from many countries in this webinar. My name is Joris van der Vis from Security Bridge, and together with me, I have Michael Eidman from AnswerThink. We're happy to present this webinar to you and talk in the next roughly 30 minutes or so about SAP cybersecurity and the need for an additional last line of defense, specifically aiming at your SAP application. This is the agenda for today. Happy to introduce Michael in a few slides, and then we'll have a look at the need for SAP cybersecurity and why a last line of defense is needed specifically for SAP systems, and talk a bit more about Security Bridge. And then at the end, there is gonna be room for questions. So if you have any questions, please feel free to drop them in the question area, and I'm happy to answer them after the presentation. A few words first on Security Bridge and Protect4S, and the merging of those two. I'm one of the co-founders of Protect4S. We are really happy that we are able to bundle our powers with a great team of Security Bridge and deliver even better security software solutions to the market. We joined the Security Bridge team only a few months ago, and really strongly believe this will be beneficial for all stakeholders, customers, partners, and of course our own employees. We come from different angles in the SAP cybersecurity field. And joining forces really makes sense to be able to even better help our customers and partners. I'm happy to give the word to Michael to introduce himself. Before doing that, my name again is Joris van der Vis. I'm a SAP cybersecurity specialist already for over 15 years. And I'm happy to present this webinar to you today. But first, let's introduce our partner, Michael Eidman from AnswerThink.
Well, thank you, Joris. So my name is Michael Eidman with AnswerThink, what is a part of the Hackett Group. And AnswerThink is an SAP Platinum partner. We're also a reseller, system integrator, and an SAP managed service provider. Myself, I'm in the SAP space for over 30 years around SAP basis and technology. And in my last 18 years with AnswerThink, have been driving technology and cloud adoption for our customers and SAP practices. About 2 years ago, we added a Protect4S vulnerability solution to our SAP AMS services portfolio as a service to help protecting our customers against cyber security threats and keeping up with the monthly release of SAP security notes. Everyone who has been trying to keep up with security notes knows that is quite tedious work, and we were looking for a solution that can help us stay ahead of the 8 ball and through automation being able to apply these changes on a more frequent basis. So using Protect4S, we have been able to identify and mitigate hundreds of threats, cutting down the security patch cycle from about twice a year to about every other month for most customers. And I'm really excited to have Joris explain the importance about securing your SAP landscape beyond the traditional network firewall setup and OS security patching, but should of course be part of everyone's security strategy. So with that, Joris, let's get started.
Thanks, Michael. And to follow up on your last words, it should be part of everybody's strategy. Yes, I fully agree, except it's not. So let's start with the need for SAP cybersecurity, the why. And it's good to first think about that for a couple of seconds, because it's not for free. Why do we need to spend money on that? And Do we really need this? Because it does add some work. That's absolutely true, for example, to the basis team or the OS or database team or compliance or authorization or our teams. But I think, and this is maybe something to make it a bit more personal. So in your situation, just think about it. Let's spend a few moments to think about what it means if your business is affected and if your SAP systems go down. I'm pretty sure there will be impact. It depends from business to business what that impact is, but it's good to think about it. Just think about it for a second, and what would it cost your business? Would it cripple your business? Would it come to a halt, or can you continue running and operating your SAP, or sorry, your business processes? I'm pretty sure in many cases it will have an effect. From business to business, of course, it can differ, but we have seen in many cases that if SAP systems go down, if they are ransomed, it has a really big impact on the day-to-day business operations. So I cannot answer this for all of you, but in general, I think it's quite clear that if your SAP systems go down, you and the business have a problem. So SAP systems are important. What we have seen beyond SAP systems are quite some developments over time. So what we have seen, for example, over the past 20 years, and this is in the SAP field, but this is also outside the business, outside the field of SAP systems specifically, there has been a massive adoption of doing online businesses, also affecting SAP systems. They are no more operated only within the boundaries of the organization, but we see definitely SAP systems also connected to the internet. There has been a big increase again of doing online business. SAP was a bit late to the party with online solutions, but also as of, let's say, roughly 2005, things picked up there. And what we have been doing, for example, in 2019, we have been scanning the whole internet for SAP services we could find online. And what we found, a link will be provided for more information so you can check all the details yourself. But what we found on a high level, for example, was a total of over 25,000 SAP services that were online. And they are not all unique SAP systems, but when we, let's say, aggregated that, we found over 17,000 uniquely identifiable SAP systems, which is quite a lot. In response to all this online business, also cybercrime has increased massively. The risk is low and the reward can be high, and also no physical presence is needed, unlike robbing a bank, for example. It's quite difficult to provide an exact estimate on the increase in cybercrime over the past 20 years. But according to some estimates, the global cost of cybercrime has increased by a factor of 400 since 2000. So there is a lot of money to gain. And also a lot of that money is flowing through SAP systems. On top of that, we also see a strong drive in the direction of more legislation. Think, for example, GDPR or NIS2, some European examples, but also in America, there's all kind of legislation coming towards SAP running customers and organizations. So things change, and they change fast. And for me, it's clear that there is definitely a need for strong SAP cybersecurity to keep our business critical SAP systems secure. This need for a better SAP cybersecurity comes with quite some challenges for many organizations. Again, these are some observations that we have seen over the past 20 years that we are in this business, and there has been quite some things we saw that were an issue and quite often still are an issue. And one of them is that it's often unclear who is responsible for the security of these systems, especially in the SAP field. It's not always that clear. Is it the SAP basis team? Is it the CISO? Or is it the authorizations team? but it can also be a network team, a database team. They're all involved in operating an SAP system. It's not always that clear. So this responsibility is definitely a challenge. Also, since SAP systems, it's quite a weird application sometimes with its own protocols. It's a separate category, right? So that means it's not always on the general security agenda. Then also in the field of SAP security, it's quite difficult to find the needed resources. It's already hard in generic security, but in the field of SAP cybersecurity, it's even harder. Also, what we saw in the past was that the topic of cybersecurity was not fully addressed. For example, via audits or other means, and the focus has always been on segregation of duty, authorizations, and roles and profiles. It's good to see, and that is a recent development, that also auditors nowadays more and more start looking at the topic of cybersecurity, which really increases security there as well. SAP itself has not always been the best help in providing you with adequate tooling and support. And I'm not being negative here, but there is a lot. And this is maybe a challenge in itself, because there are hundreds of security guides, security notes, functionalities in SAP Solution Manager, but it's quite scattered. It's hard to set up and maintain. And quite often you still need specialized resources to work with that. Or customers also tell us that they find it hard to find specific documentation in this wide forest of information. So there are quite some challenges. And I think customers will recognize that. Also, what we have seen, and this is typically something that is coming from our own assessments, is that these traditional methods that are there, like firewalls and network security, might not really stop attackers specifically for SAP systems. What we have seen a lot is once intruders breach the corporate network, then it's often not that hard to gain access to your SAP systems. And that is why there is a need for a last line of defense. We'll zoom in on that. Because, and this is something I think also people might recognize, traditionally SAP security was mainly about segregation of duties and authorizations, and that is important. But what has often been neglected is what we call the other side of security. SAP cybersecurity, SAP infra security, or SAP platform security, it doesn't really matter what you call it, but everything else than authorizations and authorization metrics and GRC and SOD, so more the hard side of SAP cybersecurity. You can have your authorizations metric implemented perfectly, but if you have left unpatched vulnerabilities in your SAP systems, or if you still have like default insecure settings or default accounts in your SAP system, it's quite easy for an attacker to completely bypass that authorization matrix and directly gain access to the SAP system's operating system or database, and by doing so gain full access to all SAP data. So it's therefore important to also spend some time on that side of the security coin to cover that as well. And yeah, it highlights the need for a last line of defense for SAP systems. So I think this is basically what I just said, with some additions, because we have seen it quite often when doing SAP assessments or penetration testing. Once you are in the network, it's often not too hard to gain access to an SAP system, for example, via insecure default settings or unpatched vulnerabilities. And once you are in the system, it doesn't really matter which system. It can be a sandbox system or a development system. Then typically it's not really that hard to move throughout this SAP landscape and jump from one system to another system. Because of the typical interconnectivity between SAP systems, and also because when SAP was implemented, quite often, for example, in RFC connections, users were put there with extensive authorizations like SAP all. And that makes it really easy to jump from one system to another system and eventually end up in your production systems with productive data. So again, there is a need really for this last line of defense that looks at the application level. And typically, the investments done by customers in authorizations or standard firewalls and other, let's say, generic defense is not always helpful to protect you specifically in this case. I mentioned already, we have been doing quite some assessments and we have done quite some, let's say, findings, and we found quite some blind spots. And this is not a full list, it's just some examples of these typical, quite often technical settings that are not done correct or still left on an insecure default, especially customers that run SAP systems already for a decade or two. They still have these insecure defaults in their SAP systems quite often, unless you fix them, but this is not always done. What we also see within the SAP world is that typically SAP customers are not the fastest on applying critical SAP security nodes, the SAP patches. And this is because it often means downtime. Downtime is not something the business wants, so there's always this discussion, there's testing involved, which really slows down the patch process. So it's not really uncommon for SAP customers to be behind on SAP patches. On top of that, there's a lot of insecure connections between SAP systems, typically because setting encryption is not always that straightforward. Maybe for HTTP connections, yes. There's again own protocols involved, SAP specific protocols that need specific encryption like SNC to be able to secure those connections. And it's not always that easy to set that up. We also find, for example, the SAP Secure Store with default encryption keys. This is one of those insecure settings that has been there for quite a long time, which means that if somebody gains access to the table where the security secrets are stored, you can quite easily decrypt them with a default key, giving you access to all the RFC users, again, making it possible to jump to other SAP systems. Quite some challenges also for customers with access control lists around these technical components like the message server or the RFC gateway. Again, they were implemented in an insecure default by quite a long time. Same thing for password hashes. They can be stored in a secure way, but many customers still operate their SAP systems with the old password hashes, or they are on the new version, but also have the old version that is still unsafe in their SAP system. So backwards compatibility. So there's a lot to do in that area as well. And then a lot of parameters. There's literally hundreds of parameters that you can set that are relevant for your security context. Quite often they came with an insecure setting and you really need to go over all of them and check them. It's really hard. The list is much longer. I'll not go over all of them, but you get the idea. So I think talking about this is quite interesting maybe by itself, but I'm more than happy to show you some exploit examples. What I think is also interesting to know is that there are online resources available, resources that you can just find by Googling that will, let's say, provide tooling or exploits that can actively exploit these vulnerabilities that are found by researchers. I'm happy to show you two of them in a demo. These are, again, older vulnerabilities, but we still do find them in assessments. So it doesn't mean that they're older, that they're not found in the wild. To start with one demo, this is a demo showing you how the exploitation of your RFC gateway and message server work. It's quite a complex script, but again, a good search on GitHub and you will find it. Basically, what you can do is use a Python script to register your own laptop or local computer as an SAP application server, giving it, let's say, a trusted status. and from there on really exploit your SAP systems. So by default, it's not possible to execute OS commands. As you can see on the right, let me go back a bit. You can see SAP Star is not authorized to start a specific program, but what we can do on the left from our own local laptop is try and get ourselves in the trusted zone by registering our own local machine as an SAP application server, which in itself is quite weird because we have no application server running. With the script, we can do so. And as we can see in the SAP system, you can see in the lower line, let me go back a bit, is that we successfully registered ourselves as an SAP application server on the message server. This takes some time, but eventually you can see you are allowed if you have not set up proper access control lists, but by default, these were insecure for quite some time. And then since we are in a trusted zone, we can execute OS commands. For example, when we do a directory listing, you can see all the files in the work directory of the specific SAP system. Just an example of how you can use insecure default settings and let's say publicly available exploitation scripts from the internet to do so. We have another example. This is dubbed the recon vulnerability. It's found already quite some time ago. It's a couple of years ago that this was found, but still we did an SAP pen test a couple of months ago, and we were able to, and there was just one system where this vulnerability was present. But that's enough, right? If you gain access to one SAP system, again, quite often it's enough to be able to breach the rest of your SAP landscape. And this is what happened there, and I'll show you how it works. Again, this is just an SAP exploit that you can download from GitHub. It's really easy. The only thing you have to do is point it towards an SAP system. As you can see here, you only need a Java port in this case and the IP address of an SAP system. It can also be exploited over the internet if you directly connect these ports to the internet. And then what happens if we execute it? It will try to create a new administrative user in the Java stack without any form of authentication whatsoever. You can see it says, okay, admin user created. And then all you have to do is use the user and password that is created to log on to that SAP system. It's really child's play. As you can see, we just copy, paste the user and the password, and you can log on with administrative rights. It's really that simple. The only thing you have to do to prevent this is apply a patch, but make sure that you do it on all Java systems. The example I just mentioned, for example, was an SAP Solution Manager that traditionally was a dual stack in the past with an ABAP and a Java side. And this Java side of this SAP system was simply out of scope for patching because people were only using the ABAP side, but the Java side was still there and it wasn't patched. So that's why it's important to have an inventory of all your SAP application servers, all the products that you have running, and then make sure you have them all in scope when it comes to patching. These are just some examples of, let's say, exploits. The good news is there is definitely a lot of possibilities to better secure your SAP systems. Of course, as a vendor, I'm happy to share you all the options and possibilities and functionality and features there are from the Security Bridge platform. There is definitely a lot of other options, ranging from SAP tooling itself, where there is, let's say, products and tooling available from SAP, where there is like the Solution Manager that has a lot of free functionality. We often get back from customers that they are not that happy because, again, it's scattered functionality and it's quite hard to set up and maintain. And for example, if you patch the Solution Manager, you have to repair a lot of that functionality and it's not all working together. And of course, there's commercial vendors such as ourselves that offer really integrated solutions in the form of a platform. Let me give you a quick demo. I promise you it's not going to be a long demo. If you want to see more about the solution, we are more than happy to get in touch with you and discuss proof of value kind of options where you can really see the power of the solution yourself. I'll keep it short, but important to know is that this is an integrated platform. So built on SAP technology in this typically Fiori style dashboards, you can really have one entry point, one management dashboard to gain insight into, let's say, the security of your SAP systems. Let me log on again because my session was expired. There is again one place, in this case a management dashboard, that really shows you the security status of your whole SAP landscape from all angles. And this is not just vulnerability management or security and compliance as we call it, but also there's real-time monitoring. There is like code scanning options for code vulnerabilities, and there's a lot of other functionality that you can all combine and use to gain an insight in the status of your SAP landscape. Having support for many SAP system types, like not just ABAP or Java systems, but also cloud connectors, web dispatchers, SAP routers, but also all kind of new, let's say, cloud solutions from SAP. You can connect this to BTP tenants or, for example, SuccessFactors or Concur, and that's a good thing. It's not limiting you to only ABAP or Java, but really connecting this whole SAP ecosystem into one management dashboard and really show you all the important events happening, but also misconfigurations. I'll not go over each and every individual functionality, but I think you get the point. Also important to know, there is quite strong information coming from patch management, so you can also see what SAP security nodes you are missing. There's even ongoing automation in the area of, let's say, automatic implementation functionality. So it's not just showing you, hey, this is wrong with your SAP systems in terms of security, but it's also aiding you and helping you towards getting into a more secure state. For now, I'll leave the demo. Again, there's options to get a proof of value and work with the solution yourself. It's quite easy to set up and start working with the solution and really see the benefits yourself. For now, I think this pretty much concludes what I wanted to tell you. Again, what we have seen is that the world is changing. Threats are changing. Audit pressure is changing, and it's not enough anymore to invest just in generic security. You need an additional line of defense for your SAP systems to be able to get in control and stay in control. The Security Bridge platform supports you in that, but it's also good to know that there's quite a strong network of partners behind us that can really help with that and help you, because it's not uncommon for customers to not have all this experience in their own house. So I'm happy again to have Michael in this call from AnswerThink, who is definitely able with his team to help you and support you with that. Having said that, I think we have spent 30 minutes talking. I'm happy to hear if there's questions from your side. Just checking, Patricia, do we already have some questions? Otherwise, I'm inviting you to please put them in the question area. I'm seeing one question. Does Security Bridge produce a report to be briefed to executive management? Yes, so there's quite some reporting options ranging from really high level management executive overview reports to more detailed specific reports. So yes, that's definitely a yes. What is the standard process of conducting a penetration test within SAP? Yeah, that's an interesting one. So I'm coming from a pen test background, and even though there is no standard process because we tailor make, let's say, this whole thing per assignment, but there are some generics that I think always apply. So there is the scope, and this is quite important because you don't want to, in general, you don't need to do a penetration test on your full landscape. You can, but the thing is, the more systems you do a pen test on, it will drive to higher costs, and it's therefore important to, let's say, come up with a good scope. Target some, let's say, specific production systems that contain all your important information, but also look at the, let's say, more network specific SAP components like web dispatchers, SAP routers that might be connected to the internet. And then if you have, let's say, defined a good SAP scope, then you also need to discuss, let's say, if you want to do it like a real black box penetration test, so without not too much upfront information, or work more via a white box based approach where you do have, for example, credentials and look from within. We do all kind of combinations. Quite often it's not uncommon to, for example, start with a white box scan, and then from there, based on all the findings you have, and it can be perfectly done from the inside because then you have better insight in the vulnerabilities. Then from there, with customers, look at, hey, we have these findings, some of them are critical. Do you want us to show them how to practically exploit them from a hacker perspective? So there's all kinds of options. The scenario I just described with a more mixed approach is quite common. I see a question, how long would implementation take? This is, I think, referring to the implementation of the security bridge platform. So it's hard to say because it really depends on the size and also on, let's say, the speed of implementation by the customer itself. So let me give you some examples what I mean with that. If you have many SAP systems that you need to monitor, it takes a bit longer because you need to have credentials and imports and transports in all these systems. But it's not that hard. It's quite easy in general. It's installing a central system, which is called a controller, and install agents or, let's say, other software on the systems to be monitored. This is a one-time activity. The more systems, the longer it takes, but it's not that hard. And why it's depending also on, let's say, the implementation speed or change management speed of customers, because you need credentials, and sometimes this can be arranged easily at customers. Sometimes it takes a bit more to get these credentials, but roughly a couple of days and your initial installation is done. Of course, you need to also include some time, for example, when you use let's say, real-time threat detection to really filter some false positives and things like that. But we're happy to discuss that maybe if needed in another moment. In general, it's quite easy to set up. Some other questions I see, does Security Bridge perform real-time monitoring with alert notifications? Yes, this is really the strong suit of the platform. The, let's say, background of the Security Bridge team is really coming from real-time monitoring. So there's more than a decade of experience built into the platform. There's hundreds of use cases. There's dozens of data sources you can connect to really get out the data and the events to be able to really do real-time monitoring. And yes, you can set up all kind of notifications and actions based on the findings. So yes, there's definitely a lot of options there. Some other questions I see is how many threat patterns available and are they yeah, so this is what I just mentioned. There's hundreds of use cases, and you can also build your own. What is required to set it up? Agent in the network, yes, but for ABAP systems, this can be an agent that is platform or sorry, application specific. So it's not always an operating system agent, what people often think. It can also be for ABAP systems, just an application layer ABAP agent. So no need to do anything there for ABAP systems on the operating system, for example. Is it possible to do a scan of the SAP environment of a client by security bridge? Not sure what is meant with that specifically. If you mean in the, let's say, scenario where this is done by a third party provider, yes, that is possible. A scan is possible. Even though it does require the installation of the platform. So it's not something you carry with you on a laptop and plug it in the network and do a scan. No, you do need to have a central controller system and to set up the connections like you would do for any other SAP, security bridge installation. What is required to, yeah, that one is already answered. Can security bridge be installed on the SAP focused run platform? On which platforms does security bridge run? So yes, in general, at a minimum level, you need a NetWeaver 730, but it's really advised to use a NetWeaver 740 or higher, because then you can really benefit better from all the latest and greatest technology. This is a generic thing, so NetWeaver 740 or higher, and that also includes SAP focused run, even though there are some discussions, because I think SAP advises to not run anything else on your SAP focused run platform, but that's another discussion. Technically, you're absolutely fine to do so. Next question is, by doing custom pen tests, do you have to fill out a form to let SAP know you will be conducting a pen test, scope of test, and for how long? Yeah, I'm guessing that this is a question asked by somebody that runs SAP in, let's say, the SAP hosting scenario in RISE, for example. So there are some challenges indeed in that sense. So far, we have mainly been doing SAP penetration testing on SAP systems that were hosted by customers themselves or in hyperscalers, so on AWS or Microsoft Azure. But yes, you can also do penetration testing on, let's say, RISE. The thing is there, you do need to inform SAP indeed. And also it's good to definitely discuss with SAP, because there's other, let's say, scoping that might be involved. For example, if you want to do some stuff from the operating system, this is managed by SAP in that case. So you do need to have the discussion. So yes, it's a bit different. How long does your penetration test of a single SAP system take? Yeah, so again, that depends on the scope. And I think it's also good to mention that penetration testing, where many people think of really black box penetration testing, that is interesting to do. But for many customers, really the majority of customers, it's way more interesting to start from a more white box based approach, where you really look from the inside with a user and a password, because it's more easy to really analyze large amounts of data. And it will produce much better and actionable findings than just a black box penetration test. So it's good to stress that most customers that start with this, they really are better off by just using the white box based approach capabilities of the security bridge platform. And also good to mention is that really black box penetration testing is not something that's done from the security bridge platform. We have our own tooling for that, But again, this is very specific, and for most customers, probably not the first thing they want to start with, and they're better off doing just a generic security and compliance scan to really see, hey, what areas are not properly configured, and really look from the inside. With regards to the size forecast, so this is a question about sizing, how much space and the size of the data security bridge can contribute in terms of growth factor. Yeah, this is also a good question. There's a lot of information I can provide there, but I think it's better to discuss it in more detail. We have a knowledge base that tells you a lot about that. It also depends on the functionality that you switch on. If you use, for example, event monitoring, real-time threat detection, you do need to switch on a lot of logging, and that logging is used then to run the use cases on. That logging can produce quite some large amounts of data depending on the specific events that you switch on. So yeah, it can become quite a lot, and you also need to think then about retention periods and cleaning up of the log files. If you don't use event monitoring, of course, the used space is much less. Also with regards to, let's say, the usage of CPU and memory, it's quite limited, but on the, let's say, remote monitored systems, it's typically, I think the given figure is like 3% of the system resources are used for monitoring. So that's not a lot. On the controller system, central system, you might need a bit more of CPU and memory, but there's a lot of information in the knowledge base. For people that want to know specifics there, just get in touch. I'm happy to share that information. So how does Security Bridge address ad hoc forensic analysis? Yes, there's functionality there as well. Again, we've just joined the Security Bridge team recently. I've seen quite some interesting features there. You can, for example, switch on hyperlogging and really on a detailed level log a lot of data for a specific user or coming from a specific workstation. So there's all kind of options there. Also in the event monitoring area, you can really see and look at the data from different angles and see related events coming from specific workstations or IP addresses, for example. So there's all sorts of reporting you can do. Also good to know, all the data that is collected can be forwarded to SIEM solutions in typically security operations centers, where you can correlate the data for forensic analysis with other sources that are non-SAP specific. So from firewalls or other, let's say, network devices. That also benefits and helps forensic analysis. So a lot of options there. I think there are some questions left. How many predefined threat patterns are available? Yeah, I don't know it by heart exactly, but there's hundreds of use cases. Again, the Security Bridge platform is coming typically from the event monitoring field. There's hundreds. I don't know the specific number, but there's a lot, and it's in the industry really really top notch. From the Protect for S side in the past, we've also been working on this, and we had only a dozen of use cases, like 50, 60, 70, and within the Security Bridge platform, again, it's hundreds, and there's again the option to create your own if you wanted to extend it. But quite often there's no need to do so, because already the platform covers all the important topics and threat patterns. Can Security Bridge then, as a last question, be installed on S4 Foundation, the successor to NetWeaver ABAP 7.5, on which on-premise SAP product can Security Bridge be operated after 2027? So yeah, for now, yes, again, there is support for 740 and higher. That includes the S4 HANA systems. So that's definitely not an issue. On which on-premise SAP products can security bridge be operated after 2027? Yeah, so this is a big discussion, right, in the SAP field, where SAP says they will stop support of some on-premise solutions after 2027. This is not a big issue because, again, it runs on the S4 systems as well, so that's definitely fine. The specifics about that, it's not 100% clear, I think, for now, what the future will bring there. But don't get me wrong, 2027 is still 4 years away. And in general, we can just say, if your SAP system is SAP supported, then Security Bridge will run on it. So there's no need to worry that it will not run anymore. And I'm pretty sure it will even be still running on older, let's say, non-supported SAP systems, because that's also the case nowadays. I mean, there is support as of NetWeaver 7.30, but you probably don't want to run on that anymore. But even if you do, there is still support for these older systems. So that's covered. That's covered quite well. Thanks again. A lot of questions. I hope I managed to answer them in a correct way. If not, please feel free to reach out. We are happy to provide you more information. There's an extensive knowledge base available, which also cover a lot of these questions. That having said, thanks for your attention. I'm happy, and looking at the amount of questions, I think this is a topic that is quite relevant. Again, thanks. Have a great day, and I'm happy to stay in touch in the future. Thanks. Have a great day.